Many people immediately assume that a person without close friends must be lonely, socially awkward, or somehow lacking an important quality. This assumption is one of the most common psychological misconceptions in modern society. Human behavior is far more complex than simple appearances. The absence of a large social circle does not automatically indicate emotional weakness, just as having hundreds of friends does not guarantee happiness or fulfillment. The real question is never how many people surround someone, but why they choose or end up living the way they do. Understanding this distinction is the first step toward understanding human nature itself. Psychologists have long recognized a profound difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is an emotional state marked by the painful awareness that meaningful connection is missing. Solitude, however, is something entirely different. It is often a conscious decision to step away from constant social stimulation in order to think clearly, recover emotionally, strengthen one's identity, or pursue meaningful goals without distraction. These two experiences may look identical from the outside, yet internally they are worlds apart. One drains the spirit, while the other can restore it. One creates emotional suffering, while the other often becomes the birthplace of wisdom, creativity, and self-mastery. Throughout history, some of the most influential philosophers, writers, scientists, strategists, and leaders intentionally embraced long periods of isolation. They understood something that most people overlook. Clarity rarely emerges from noise. When the mind is constantly surrounded by opinions, expectations, and endless conversations, it becomes increasingly difficult to hear its own authentic voice. Solitude creates space for reflection. It allows individuals to question their beliefs, sharpen their judgment, and observe life without the pressure of fitting into a crowd. Many breakthroughs in philosophy, science, literature, and leadership were born not in busy social gatherings, but in moments of quiet contemplation. This idea closely reflects timeless principles of human nature and self-mastery. Individuals who constantly depend on external approval gradually lose the ability to evaluate themselves objectively. Their emotions become tied to praise, acceptance, and recognition from others. As a result, their decisions are often influenced more by popularity than by wisdom. They begin adjusting their behavior to satisfy the expectations of the crowd instead of remaining loyal to their own principles. Over time, this dependence weakens personal judgment because every choice requires validation from someone else. In contrast, people who become comfortable spending time alone often develop emotional independence. They learn to solve problems without panic, reflect before reacting, and distinguish temporary emotions from lasting truths. Instead of immediately seeking reassurance whenever uncertainty appears, they cultivate the habit of observing their thoughts with patience. This quiet discipline strengthens resilience because it teaches them that peace does not always come from external circumstances. It often begins within. Such individuals are generally less influenced by social pressure because their confidence is rooted in self-understanding rather than public approval. Yet solitude also carries a hidden danger when it is chosen for the wrong reasons. Not everyone who lives alone has discovered inner peace. Sometimes isolation is not a decision born from wisdom, but a defense mechanism created by emotional wounds. Repeated experiences of betrayal, rejection, criticism, or disappointment can convince a person that avoiding relationships is safer than risking pain again. The human brain naturally seeks protection. If trusting others repeatedly leads to suffering, the mind gradually associates closeness with danger. What begins as temporary emotional protection slowly transforms into permanent avoidance. Eventually, the person may convince themselves that they simply prefer being alone, when in reality they are protecting an unhealed fear. Human psychology is remarkably adaptive. The behaviors we repeat eventually become our identity. A person who consistently withdraws from social interaction may no longer feel uncomfortable being alone because the brain adjusts to the new pattern. What was once a coping strategy becomes a lifestyle. This adaptation explains why some individuals sincerely believe they no longer need close relationships. However, beneath that belief may still exist a deeply human desire to be understood, respected, and accepted by someone who values them without conditions. The need for meaningful connection never completely disappears. It simply becomes hidden beneath layers of emotional protection. The greatest lesson, therefore, is not that people without friends are somehow superior or inferior. The true lesson is that appearances reveal very little about someone's inner world. Solitude can be a sign of extraordinary discipline, emotional maturity, and independent thinking. It can also be a quiet signal of unresolved pain, disappointment, or fear that has never been fully addressed. Wisdom lies in recognizing the difference. Real strength is found neither in avoiding people nor in desperately seeking them. It is found in developing the inner stability to enjoy your own company while remaining open to relationships built on trust, respect, honesty, and genuine understanding. When solitude becomes a choice rather than an escape, it transforms from isolation into one of the most powerful tools for personal growth and lasting self-mastery. Independence is one of the most admired qualities a person can possess. Society celebrates those who solve their own problems, stand on their own feet, and refuse to depend on others for success. From childhood, many people are taught that strength means handling everything alone, hiding vulnerability, and never asking for help. While this mindset can build resilience, discipline, and confidence, psychology reveals that when independence becomes excessive, it often creates an invisible barrier between a person and meaningful relationships. Human beings are naturally social creatures. Throughout history, survival depended not only on individual ability but also on cooperation, trust, and shared responsibility. Even the strongest leaders, greatest strategists, and most accomplished thinkers relied on alliances, mentors, and loyal companions. Yet there are individuals who gradually convince themselves that depending on others is dangerous. This belief usually does not emerge overnight. It develops through repeated experiences of disappointment, betrayal, neglect, or broken trust. After enough emotional pain, the mind creates a protective rule. If I rely only on myself, no one can hurt me. At first, this philosophy feels empowering. The individual becomes highly capable, self-disciplined, and emotionally controlled. They learn valuable skills, solve difficult problems independently, and rarely seek reassurance from others. To outsiders, they appear confident and completely self-sufficient. However, beneath this impressive exterior lies a subtle psychological cost. Relationships are built not merely on respect, but on mutual openness. Friendship grows when people exchange support, share struggles, and allow themselves to be seen beyond their achievements. A person who never reveals weakness may earn admiration, but admiration alone does not create emotional closeness. Robert Greene frequently emphasizes that power begins with self-reliance. Yet he also illustrates throughout history that no strategist succeeds entirely alone. The greatest rulers surrounded themselves with trusted advisors. The wisest philosophers engaged in intellectual dialogue. The most successful innovators collaborated with capable allies. Their strength did not come from rejecting people. It came from carefully choosing whom to trust. True independence is not isolation. It is the freedom to choose relationships without becoming emotionally dependent on them. Psychologists describe this pattern as defensive self-sufficiency. Instead of asking, "Who deserves my trust?" the person unconsciously decides, "No one deserves my trust." While this protects against disappointment, it also prevents the development of genuine intimacy. Friends may interpret emotional distance as arrogance, indifference, or a lack of interest. They may stop reaching out, believing their efforts are unwanted. Ironically, the independent person often feels misunderstood, while others simply assume they prefer to be alone. Another consequence of extreme independence is the inability to receive support gracefully. Offering help is one of the primary ways humans strengthen social bonds. When someone consistently refuses assistance, others lose opportunities to contribute to the relationship. Friendship is not sustained by one person giving and another receiving. It thrives through mutual exchange. Allowing someone to help occasionally is not a sign of weakness. It is an invitation to deeper trust. There is also a hidden emotional burden carried by those who insist on handling everything alone. They often experience stress in silence, celebrate victories in silence, and process failures in silence. Over time, this constant self-reliance becomes exhausting. The mind can endure remarkable pressure, but even the strongest individuals benefit from having someone who listens without judgment. Emotional resilience is strengthened not only by inner discipline but also by healthy human connection. This does not mean abandoning independence or becoming dependent on others for happiness. The healthiest personality balances self-sufficiency with openness. Such individuals know they can survive alone if necessary, yet they also recognize that life becomes richer when shared with trustworthy people. They neither chase companionship out of insecurity nor reject it out of fear. Instead, they build relationships based on respect, honesty, and mutual growth. Ultimately, the strongest people are not those who prove they need no one. The strongest are those who possess the courage to remain independent while still allowing the right people to walk beside them. That balance reflects not weakness, but true emotional maturity and self-mastery. Many people believe that making friends is simply a matter of confidence, charisma, or opportunity. But one of the most overlooked psychological barriers to meaningful relationships is not a lack of social skill. It is an excess of mental analysis. The mind, designed to protect us from danger, can sometimes become so focused on predicting negative outcomes that it begins creating obstacles where none actually exist. Instead of allowing conversations to unfold naturally, it turns every interaction into a performance that must be evaluated, perfected, and replayed. This pattern often begins with a heightened sensitivity to social feedback. A person walks away from a perfectly ordinary conversation, yet their mind refuses to let it end. They replay every sentence they spoke, every pause they made, every facial expression they noticed, and every possible interpretation of their words. They ask themselves endless questions. Did I sound awkward? Why did they hesitate before answering? Did I say something foolish? What if they secretly disliked me? Hours later, while everyone else has forgotten the conversation, they are still trapped inside it, searching for mistakes that may never have existed. The remarkable thing about the human brain is that it cannot always distinguish between imagined threats and real ones. When overthinking becomes habitual, the body reacts as though rejection has already occurred. The heart races before social events, muscles tense during conversations, and confidence gradually fades. Eventually, the fear of embarrassment becomes stronger than the desire for connection. Relationships begin to feel emotionally expensive because every interaction demands enormous mental energy. Robert Greene often reminds us that perception shapes reality. A person who constantly expects rejection unconsciously begins behaving in ways that invite distance. They hesitate before speaking, avoid eye contact, give short answers, or remain unusually quiet, not because they lack intelligence or kindness, but because their attention is consumed by self-monitoring rather than genuine engagement. Ironically, the very behaviors they adopt to avoid judgment can make others assume they are uninterested, distant, or difficult to approach. Thus, the fear creates the outcome it was trying to prevent. Perfectionism quietly fuels this cycle. Some individuals believe they must always appear interesting, clever, confident, or entertaining before they deserve friendship. They imagine that one awkward moment will permanently define how others see them. Yet meaningful relationships are rarely built on flawless performances. They grow through shared imperfections, spontaneous laughter, misunderstood jokes, and honest conversations. People connect not because someone appears perfect, but because they appear real. There is another hidden cost of excessive analysis. It steals presence. Instead of listening carefully to the person in front of them, the overthinker listens to their own inner critic. While the conversation continues, their attention is divided between the external world and an internal commentary, evaluating every word. Genuine curiosity disappears because self-consciousness occupies all available mental space. Connection requires presence, and presence becomes impossible when the mind refuses to stop judging itself. The solution is not to eliminate thought, but to change its direction. Rather than asking, "How am I being perceived?" begin asking, "What can I learn about this person?" This subtle shift moves attention away from self-protection and toward genuine interest. People naturally enjoy conversations with those who make them feel heard, understood, and valued. Confidence often emerges not from thinking more about yourself, but from thinking less about yourself. Every meaningful relationship requires a willingness to tolerate uncertainty. You cannot control every impression, predict every outcome, or guarantee that every person will appreciate you. Human nature is too complex for perfect social calculations. The strongest individuals understand that rejection is not proof of inadequacy, but an inevitable part of life. They accept that some connections will flourish while others will quietly fade, and they refuse to let either outcome determine their self-worth. Ultimately, overthinking is not a sign of weakness. It is often a sign of intelligence misdirected by fear. The same analytical mind that invents endless social disasters can also become a powerful tool for wisdom, empathy, and emotional insight when guided by awareness instead of anxiety. The goal is not to silence the mind completely, but to prevent it from becoming a prison. because the moment you stop treating every conversation like an examination, you finally become free to experience it as what it was always meant to be, a simple human connection. Many people who appear emotionally distant are not cold-hearted at all. In reality, they are often carrying invisible experiences that have quietly reshaped the way they interact with the world. Human beings are not born suspicious, guarded, or reluctant to trust. Those tendencies are usually learned through repeated experiences of disappointment, betrayal, rejection, or emotional neglect. Every painful interaction teaches the brain a lesson. If those lessons accumulate over time, the mind begins constructing protective walls, not because it wants isolation, but because it wants safety. Psychologists describe this as a protective adaptation. When trust is repeatedly broken, the brain becomes more vigilant. Instead of asking, "Can I connect with this person?" it begins asking, "How could this person hurt me?" This subtle shift changes everything. Conversations become more calculated. Emotions become carefully filtered. Vulnerability begins to feel dangerous rather than natural. The individual may still crave meaningful relationships, but they hesitate to reveal their true thoughts because experience has convinced them that openness often leads to disappointment. This creates one of the greatest misunderstandings in human relationships. Other people rarely see the hidden fear beneath the silence. Instead, they interpret the quiet behavior through their own assumptions. Reserved individuals are often labeled as arrogant, unfriendly, disinterested, or emotionally unavailable. Yet what appears to be indifference may actually be caution. What seems like confidence may be self-protection. What looks like emotional distance may simply be someone waiting for enough evidence that another person deserves their trust. Robert Greene frequently emphasizes that human behavior is driven less by words and more by hidden motivations. The people who seem the hardest to understand are often protecting something deeply valuable. They have learned that trust is expensive. Once given away carelessly, it can cost peace of mind, confidence, and emotional stability. As a result, they become careful observers. They watch how people behave under pressure. They notice inconsistencies between words and actions. They pay attention to how someone treats others before deciding how much of themselves to reveal. This habit of observation can become a remarkable strength. Patient observation prevents manipulation, exposes deception, and helps distinguish genuine character from charming appearances. However, every strength carries a potential weakness when taken to the extreme. If caution becomes excessive, it slowly transforms into isolation. Every new person begins to resemble an old disappointment. Every conversation feels like a potential threat. Every opportunity for friendship is judged through the lens of past pain instead of present reality. The tragedy is that emotional walls do not discriminate. They block harmful people from entering, but they also prevent trustworthy people from getting close. The same defenses that protect the heart can also imprison it. Over time, the individual may begin believing that meaningful relationships are impossible, when in fact the barrier is no longer outside them. It has quietly become part of their own behavior. Trust itself is not an instant decision. It is a gradual process built through consistency. Healthy relationships are formed not because two people immediately reveal everything about themselves, but because each small interaction creates evidence of reliability. Respect is earned, honesty is demonstrated, loyalty is observed over time. Emotional openness grows naturally when both individuals repeatedly prove that vulnerability will be met with understanding rather than exploitation. True wisdom does not demand blind trust, nor does it encourage permanent suspicion. It teaches discernment. There is a profound difference between protecting your peace and refusing every opportunity for connection. One is an act of intelligence. The other is often an unconscious reaction to unresolved fear. Emotional maturity means recognizing that while your past experiences deserve respect, they should not be allowed to dictate every future relationship. The strongest individuals are not those who never trust anyone. They are those who have learned how to trust wisely. They understand that caution is valuable, but they refuse to let fear become the architect of their entire social life. They recognize that genuine friendships require courage as much as they require judgment. In the end, the goal is not to remove every emotional wall overnight. It is to replace walls with well-built gates, strong enough to keep harmful people out, yet open enough to allow worthy people in. That balance is where real confidence, authentic connection, and lasting self-mastery begin. Many people believe that having high standards is always a virtue. In many areas of life, that assumption is true. High standards push us toward excellence, discipline, and integrity. They encourage us to choose meaningful work over comfort, truth over convenience, and long-term fulfillment over temporary pleasure. But when those same standards become rigid expectations in relationships, they can quietly transform from a source of wisdom into a barrier that keeps genuine human connection out. One of the most overlooked psychological realities is that people often judge potential friends against an ideal that no real person can consistently meet. They expect unwavering loyalty, perfect honesty, constant emotional availability, shared beliefs, similar ambitions, flawless communication, and complete understanding. The moment someone falls short in even one area, they are dismissed as unworthy. Over time, this pattern creates a shrinking social circle, not because trustworthy people do not exist, but because perfection exists only in imagination. Robert Greene often reminds us that human nature is inherently imperfect. Every individual carries contradictions within them. A person can be deeply loyal yet occasionally insensitive. Someone may be exceptionally honest but struggle with emotional expression. Another may possess remarkable wisdom while lacking confidence in certain situations. Human beings are complex collections of strengths and weaknesses, not perfectly balanced characters from a story. The moment we demand perfection from others, we begin fighting against reality itself. This does not mean lowering your standards until you tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or dishonesty. There is a profound difference between maintaining healthy boundaries and demanding impossible perfection. Boundaries protect your peace. Perfectionism isolates your heart. One is rooted in self-respect, the other is often rooted in fear. Sometimes people reject potential friendships not because the other person lacks character, but because they fear investing emotionally in someone who might eventually disappoint them. By keeping expectations unrealistically high, they create a protective filter that prevents vulnerability. Ironically, the very shield designed to protect them also prevents them from experiencing the trust they long for. Psychologists describe this tendency as a form of cognitive filtering. The mind becomes trained to notice every flaw while overlooking every strength. Instead of asking, is this person kind, trustworthy, and sincere? It begins asking, what is wrong with them? Eventually, every interaction becomes an evaluation rather than an opportunity for connection. Relationships become interviews instead of shared experiences. Instead of allowing trust to develop gradually, people expect certainty before they offer openness. But certainty is not how human relationships work. Trust is not discovered instantly. It is built slowly through consistent actions over time. There is another subtle danger hidden within excessively high standards. They often mirror the impossible expectations people secretly place upon themselves. Someone who constantly fears making mistakes may unconsciously expect everyone else to be equally flawless. Because they struggle to forgive their own imperfections, they also struggle to accept imperfections in others. This creates a cycle of emotional distance where both self-criticism and social isolation reinforce one another. The pursuit of perfection becomes a prison disguised as wisdom. The strongest and healthiest friendships are rarely formed between perfect people. They are formed between imperfect people who consistently choose honesty, respect, forgiveness, and mutual growth. Lasting relationships are not built on finding someone who never disappoints you. They are built on finding people whose character remains dependable even when misunderstandings, disagreements, or difficult seasons arise. Maturity is recognizing that occasional flaws do not automatically erase genuine loyalty. The deepest lesson is this: choose your companions carefully, but judge them fairly. Protect your values without building walls so high that no one can reach you. Seek integrity instead of perfection, consistency instead of performance, and authenticity instead of flawless appearances. In the end, the richest friendships are not those free from imperfection, but those strengthened by patience, understanding, and the willingness to grow together despite the imperfections that make us all human. Self-awareness is one of the rarest psychological strengths a person can develop, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. Most people spend their lives studying the behavior of others. They become experts at identifying dishonesty, criticizing weaknesses, and predicting other people's intentions. But they seldom turn that same level of observation inward. This creates a dangerous illusion. It becomes easy to believe that every failed friendship, every misunderstanding, and every disappointment is caused entirely by someone else. The mind naturally protects the ego by shifting responsibility outward. It is far more comfortable to conclude that people are selfish, disloyal, or impossible to trust than to ask a more difficult question. What role did I play in creating this outcome? This is where genuine self-awareness separates emotionally mature individuals from those who remain trapped in repeating the same social patterns. Every relationship is shaped by two people, and while you cannot control another person's behavior, you always possess the power to examine your own. Perhaps you struggle to express appreciation. Perhaps you expect others to understand your feelings without communicating them. Perhaps you withdraw emotionally the moment conflict appears, believing silence is safer than honesty. These patterns often operate beneath conscious awareness, quietly influencing every interaction until they become part of your identity. Robert Greene repeatedly emphasizes that human beings are poor judges of themselves because the ego constantly edits reality. We remember our good intentions more clearly than our harmful actions. We notice the disrespect we receive while overlooking the moments when we unintentionally dismiss others. We recall the promises broken to us, but conveniently forget the commitments we failed to honor ourselves. This psychological bias keeps us comfortable, but comfort rarely produces growth. Self-mastery begins when you become willing to observe yourself with the same honesty you use to observe everyone else. One of the most revealing exercises is to examine recurring patterns instead of isolated events. If one friendship ends badly, circumstances may be responsible. If nearly every close relationship follows the same painful cycle, the pattern deserves careful attention. Do people consistently describe you as distant? Do they say you are difficult to approach, overly defensive, excessively critical, or emotionally unavailable? While criticism is not always accurate, repeated feedback from different people often points toward behaviors that deserve reflection. The mature individual does not automatically accept every opinion, but neither do they reject every uncomfortable truth. They investigate before they judge. Psychology teaches that much of our social behavior develops long before adulthood. Childhood experiences, family dynamics, and early disappointments quietly shape the way we trust, communicate, and interpret the actions of others. Someone raised in an environment where emotions were ignored may grow into an adult who struggles to express affection. Someone repeatedly betrayed may interpret harmless behavior as potential rejection. These responses are understandable, but they are not permanent. Self-awareness allows you to recognize that your past explains your reactions, yet it does not have to control your future. There is also a profound difference between self-awareness and self-criticism. Many people confuse the two. Constantly blaming yourself is not wisdom. It is another form of emotional imbalance. Healthy self-awareness neither exaggerates your flaws nor ignores your strengths. It simply seeks the truth. It asks, what am I doing well and what can I improve, without allowing pride or shame to distort the answer. This balanced perspective creates emotional stability because your identity no longer depends on appearing perfect. Instead, it depends on becoming better. Ironically, the people who know themselves best often form the healthiest friendships. They communicate more clearly because they understand their own emotions. They apologize sincerely because they recognize their mistakes without feeling destroyed by them. They establish healthy boundaries because they understand their values. They choose companions more wisely because they no longer seek relationships to fill an internal emptiness. Rather than demanding that others complete them, they bring emotional wholeness into every connection. In the end, the quality of your relationships is often a reflection of the quality of your relationship with yourself. When you understand your fears, your motivations, your habits, and your emotional patterns, you stop reacting unconsciously to life. You become intentional. You become calm. You become someone whose presence brings clarity instead of confusion. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson of all. The journey toward meaningful friendships does not begin by searching for better people. It begins by becoming a better observer of the person you see in the mirror every single day. True confidence is one of the most misunderstood qualities in human nature. Most people mistake it for charisma, dominance, loud speech, or the ability to command attention. They assume the most confident person is the one who speaks the most, takes center stage, or constantly proves their worth. But psychology reveals something far more interesting. Genuine confidence is not about being noticed. It is about remaining emotionally steady whether you are noticed or not. It is an internal state rather than an external performance. A person who truly believes in their own value does not spend every conversation trying to convince others of it. They move through life with quiet certainty, and that certainty naturally attracts trust. One of the deepest principles of human behavior is that people are drawn to emotional stability. We instinctively feel safer around individuals who remain calm under pressure, who do not overreact to criticism, and who are not constantly seeking approval. Their presence communicates reliability without a single word. They do not create unnecessary drama because their self-worth does not depend on winning every argument or impressing every room they enter. This emotional consistency becomes magnetic. Others begin to feel that they can relax around them because there is no hidden agenda, no desperate need for validation, and no exhausting emotional unpredictability. Robert Greene often emphasizes that true power comes from self-command before it comes from commanding others. A person who cannot regulate their own emotions becomes easily manipulated by praise, criticism, rejection, or attention. Every compliment inflates them, and every insult diminishes them. Their emotional state remains in the hands of other people. Genuine confidence breaks this cycle. Instead of allowing external events to determine internal peace, confident individuals develop an identity rooted in values, discipline, competence, and self-awareness. Because they know who they are, they do not need constant reminders from the outside world. Ironically, many people spend years chasing confidence by trying to appear more impressive. They buy symbols of success, imitate powerful personalities, or carefully construct an image they hope others will admire. Yet the more energy they invest in appearances, the more fragile their confidence becomes. If your identity depends on being admired, then criticism becomes a threat to your entire sense of self. This explains why insecurity often hides behind arrogance. The loudest person in the room is not always the strongest. Sometimes they are simply trying the hardest to silence their own doubts. Real confidence grows differently. It is built through repeated evidence that you can rely on yourself. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens self-respect. Every difficult challenge you overcome quietly reinforces the belief that you are capable. Every disciplined action tells your subconscious mind that your words carry weight. Confidence is earned through consistent behavior, not imagined through positive thinking alone. The mind trusts action more than affirmation. This quiet confidence also transforms relationships. People naturally feel comfortable around those who do not compete for attention or constantly compare themselves with others. Confident individuals listen more than they interrupt. They ask thoughtful questions instead of waiting for their turn to speak. They celebrate other people's success without secretly viewing it as a personal loss. Their security allows generosity because another person's achievements do not diminish their own value. In this way, authentic confidence creates emotional safety, and emotional safety is one of the strongest foundations of lasting friendship. Perhaps the greatest paradox is this: the less desperately you seek acceptance, the more genuine acceptance you often receive. When you stop performing for approval and start living according to your principles, your interactions become more authentic. Some people may dislike your honesty, your independence, or your boundaries, but those who remain will appreciate the real person rather than the mask. That is the essence of meaningful relationships, not attracting everyone, but attracting the right people. Ultimately, confidence is not the absence of fear, nor is it the certainty that life will always go your way. It is the quiet belief that regardless of success or failure, praise or rejection, you possess the character to face whatever comes next. That inner stability cannot be purchased, borrowed, or faked. It is cultivated through self-mastery, strengthened through discipline, and revealed through consistent action. And once you possess it, you no longer chase relationships to complete you. Instead, you build relationships from a place of completeness, where respect replaces neediness, authenticity replaces performance, and genuine connection becomes not something you force, but something you naturally inspire. In an age where social media celebrates numbers above substance, many people quietly fall into the trap of believing that the size of their social circle determines the value of their life. We are surrounded by images of crowded parties, endless group photos, viral popularity, and thousands of online followers, creating the illusion that being constantly surrounded by people is the ultimate measure of success. Yet psychology consistently suggests something very different. Human well-being is not built upon the quantity of relationships, but upon their quality. A person with two deeply trustworthy companions often experiences greater emotional security than someone with hundreds of acquaintances who disappear the moment life becomes difficult. This difference is not merely philosophical. It reflects the very way the human mind forms attachment, trust, and resilience. Robert Greene repeatedly reminds us that appearances often deceive. A large social network may project influence, but influence without loyalty is fragile. Many individuals spend years collecting people instead of cultivating relationships, confusing visibility with genuine connection. They invest enormous energy into being liked by everyone, only to discover that popularity rarely guarantees support during moments of hardship. Human nature reveals a difficult truth. Most relationships exist because circumstances align, not because character aligns. Colleagues remain close while working together. Classmates remain connected while sharing the same environment. Neighbors interact because of proximity. But when circumstances change, many of these connections quietly fade away. What remains are the rare individuals whose loyalty was rooted in values rather than convenience. The human brain naturally seeks belonging because survival once depended upon group cooperation. However, modern society often exaggerates this instinct until people begin sacrificing authenticity simply to remain accepted. They laugh at jokes they do not find funny, agree with opinions they secretly reject, and hide their true personalities to maintain inclusion within a group. Over time, this constant performance becomes emotionally exhausting. A person surrounded by many people may paradoxically feel more isolated than someone who is physically alone because they are never truly known. Genuine friendship begins where performance ends. It requires honesty, vulnerability, mutual respect, and the courage to reveal one's authentic self without constantly seeking approval. Research in psychology consistently demonstrates that emotional intimacy, not social quantity, predicts long-term happiness. Deep conversations, dependable support during adversity, shared trust, and emotional safety activate feelings of security far more effectively than frequent but shallow interactions. One sincere conversation can strengthen emotional well-being more than dozens of casual exchanges that never move beyond surface-level topics. Meaningful relationships provide a safe environment where individuals can admit mistakes, express fears, celebrate victories without envy, and receive honest guidance without judgment. These qualities cannot be manufactured through popularity. They are earned slowly through consistency and trust. This is why emotionally mature individuals become increasingly selective as they grow older. Their standards are not driven by arrogance but by experience. They recognize that every relationship requires time, emotional energy, and attention, resources that are limited. Investing these resources wisely becomes an act of self-respect. Instead of asking how many people know me, they begin asking who truly understands me. Instead of chasing constant validation, they prioritize mutual growth, shared values, and dependable character. This shift transforms friendship from a numbers game into a deliberate investment in emotional health. None of this means withdrawing from society or believing that people are unworthy of trust. Rather, it encourages discernment. Healthy relationships remain one of life's greatest sources of strength, but they flourish through depth rather than abundance. A single loyal friend who speaks truth during failure, celebrates success without jealousy, protects your reputation in your absence, and encourages your growth is infinitely more valuable than countless acquaintances whose connection depends solely on convenience. Such friendships become anchors during uncertainty and mirrors that help us see both our strengths and our blind spots. Ultimately, the wisest people understand that the richness of a life cannot be measured by the length of a contact list or the number of invitations received. It is measured by the presence of people who remain when applause fades, when success disappears, and when circumstances become difficult. These are the relationships that shape character, strengthen resilience, and remind us that genuine human connection is built on trust, integrity, and shared purpose. The greatest wealth is not found in being known by everyone. It is found in being deeply understood by a few. When you stop chasing numbers and start cultivating authenticity, you discover a timeless truth. Quality relationships do not merely accompany a meaningful life, they help create one.